It's time for our 2020 bullet journal setup. This is a big video with a lot of sections, and if you've never journaled before, don't worry because I'm going to take you through every last little thing, from a cover page to a key to a yearly goals tracker and future log. We're getting into all of it, so let's get started. Hi friends, welcome back. My name is Shada Campbell and this is my 2020 bullet journal setup. Today we're going to cover a lot of ground. If you've never journaled before, this is the video for you, but if you've been journaling for years, I think this is also the video for you because we are going to go through every little part of what it takes to set up a bullet journal, plus a lot of new ideas that I've come up with this year, things that I want to implement to track my year and just to make a really pretty journal. My theme for the year 2020 is going to be the flowers of the month, but I'm going to try to get quite creative with that. So let's just get into it. I don't want to waste too much time, and make sure you stick around until the end of today's video because I have an amazing journaling prize pack for one of you to win to set up your own bullet journal. Grab yourself a cup of tea because we are going to be here a minute. We have so much to cover, and today we're going to talk about everything that you'll want to do if you're setting up a journal for 2020 or even setting one up for the very first time. You can follow along with everything I do, or you can pick and choose and make it your own. I'm going to try to explain why I'm doing things, and we're going to talk a little bit right now about kind of the key components of a bullet journal. So here's what we'll be covering today. The first thing we're going to do is a simple nameplate page. That's just for your journal to say whose it is. Then we'll do a cover page for the year 2020 and some New Year's resolutions. After that, we have our key, our year at a glance, and then a page of floral doodle ideas. Then we'll set up a date book, our yearly goals tracker, and our future log. And then we'll finish up with a page of affirmations, a reading tracker, and maybe a couple other fun things. Now, this is a lot of content, it's a long video, so to help you find and jump to the section that you're working on, I've listed the actual time for each section, each page, in the description below, so hopefully that helps. Let's take a moment to talk about supplies as well. If you're just starting out with bullet journaling, it really isn't a supply-heavy hobby. All you really need is a good journal, and I'm using the hardcover Confidant from Bear & Fig. I will link that in the description as well. It's about a 5x7 inch journal, and it has beautiful, thick pages, a nice dot grid to help me keep everything straight and organized, and I just love this notebook. It's also nice to have a couple binder clips on hand to keep your notebook open, and I've linked mine in the description below. And then you need just your basic writing instruments, a pencil, an eraser, and a pen. I use a mechanical pencil. They tend not to smudge as much. And then I love the Pigma Microns because they have a range of nib sizes, and that gives you a lot of precision. So picking up a pack of those and a good mechanical pencil and maybe a white gel pen, and that's really all you need. Everything else is just bonus. It's just extra. So you've got your journal, pen, pencil, and then maybe a little bit of washi tape, and you don't need tons, just 1 or 2 rolls in colors and patterns that you like, that speak to you. And then I'm going to be doing a bit more color this year. Yes, I said it, color. And the way I plan to incorporate color is through ripped paper, just some random pieces from magazines and whatnot, and with markers. Now, I've got a pretty good marker collection here, but you don't need this many. If you're just getting started, pick up 2 or 3 markers and let that be the entire color palette for your whole journal. So you don't need a lot of expensive supplies to get started. Oh, and then one supply that I just need to show off for a sec is my leather cover. This is also from Bear & Fig. My journal's feeling very swanky, and that just might be in the giveaway, so stick around. And if you're interested, you can print my 2020 cover page as well as my key for your own journal. All of the bonus content is available on my Patreon page. Okay, let's get into this. Let's start doing some actual journal work. I am beginning with my nameplate page, and I just start with a simple circle. I go around and around to help me get like an organic shape. I'll come in with my Pigma Micron. I'm using the 03 nib for this, and I am going to do a really simple wreath. And I start with one leaf shape. It's just made up of these tiny little pairs of oval leaves, and these little branches go off in every which direction. They sort of curve out and curve in off that main circle. And then after I've done a couple of those, I start incorporating a second little leaf design. And this is basically just a chubbier leaf. It's black ovals, so a little darker and a little wider. And I think what works about this is that the two leaf shapes together make the wreath look a little more intricate and detailed than it really is. So it comes together quite easily. As you finish it up, just try to find your balance with it. It doesn't need to be perfectly symmetrical, but add a little leaf where you need one. And then finally, I'll go over my pencil message in the middle there. I've just written Shada's journal, but you could of course put whatever you like. Next, we are going to do our 2020 cover page. And since I did a bunch of Dutch door pages in 2019, I wanted to incorporate at least one this year. So to do a Dutch door, you want to use 2 pages. It's like a window page. And I've counted in 9 squares on both of those pages. You can pick any number. Now we want our cover page to say 2020, and so what I've done is just printed it out, use any text editor and use quite a large font. And then I actually decided I would stack my 2020. That's just a fun idea. And so what I'm doing here is I put a little bit of pencil on the back of my printout. I'm doing it twice. I've allowed the 0 to just overlap my line there where I'll eventually be cutting the Dutch door. And then I'm going to draw some very loose leaves and maybe a couple flowers in behind the 2020. So keeping everything quite simple and playful and very loose. And I think because you've got that really structured 2020, it works. And then just jumping right in here, we are going to use color. And what you don't see in this video is me stressing for like 20 minutes saying, I just don't know if I can do color or if I should, or I don't know. It's not my comfort zone, and choosing a color palette, I'm way out in the deep end here, but it's fun and it's different. And I said for 2020 that I wanted to incorporate more color, and that is what is happening right now. I've used this really rich dark blue, and then of course a little warm gray, as well as burgundy, peach, like a very flesh tone peach, and then this light blue as well. So this is a fairly muted color palette, but it still has some pop because of that burgundy. I'm also adding a bit of dark gray. I've got the large leaves, and then I also have some really tiny leaves in the light gray and the light blue, so playing around with size a little bit. 2 large flowers in the center, and then there's 2 smaller flowers that are sort of in profile. And actually the design comes together quite quickly working in marker. Usually I'm doing pen and a lot of line shading, so this was quite fast. And I'm going to add just a little bit of a sketchy black line to some of the larger parts of the illustration, like the flowers and of course the numbers. And if you're doing this, just carefully go around your pencil lines. Try not to overthink it. They do not have to be perfect. My numbers were not perfect, and it was okay. It all worked out. Our cover page illustration is almost finished, and what I'm doing here is just filling in a little more. Now that I can really see those numbers, I just want to add a little more color in behind. So taking the gray and blue and putting a few more leaves in behind the numbers. And then I took my white gel pen and I'm just adding a little bit of line detailing on the navy blue leaves. And there's what my page looks like once I have it all cut out. That's the Dutch door for 2020. I used color, I did it, and I'm okay. I live to tell it. I'm just gonna do a quick trace around there so I know what I'm working with on the page below. And then I want to use this page to put a few of my New Year's resolutions. Just gonna be a really simple bare bones page. I'm going to pick up the light blue that I used in the cover and just do some lines there. It gives me kind of a little area for a list. Then I'll place another leafy design. This journal this year, like last year, is going to be all about the botanicals. Leaves are just so easy to draw and they always look so sophisticated. I'm going to write Dream Big along the side, decided to thicken the cursive just slightly. And there is my 2020 Dutch door cover page with a little space for my New Year's resolutions underneath. I think resolutions are so fun, just silly things like take more photos, that kind of stuff. Next up is our key. Now we'll place the key on the right and our Year of Flowers sort of key illustration will be on the left because my theme for this year is going to be the flowers of the month. So each month has a flower. So that's another item that I kind of want to incorporate into my key so that this journal is self-contained and I always know what the flower is for each month because that's what I'll be using for my cover pages going forward. So I'm just writing my labels first. I drew the grid so everything's kind of even and symmetrical. And now I'm going to do a very quick rundown of the flowers. The carnation here, I start with a little scribbly spiral, 4 ruffled petals, and then I'll do another 4 or 5 ruffled petals bordering that, a little bit of line shading, and that is it for the carnation. The violets are the flower for February, and they are quite simple to illustrate. Just that simple little 5-petal flower. Start with a circle and then go around and do those petals. They can be a little bit pointed or quite round, and then just a little line shading at the center and some tiny leaves, and they look so pretty. The daffodil has that funny stamen, so start with a circle and then kind of give it a crown going around it, and then just 5 pointed petals, not all that different from the violet, and maybe 1 or 2 thin leaves. For the daisy, I like to do a circle, and then to do the petals, I do a line first, and then I use those lines as the guide for each petal so I know which direction they're going and I don't end up with a large space in between the last 2. And then a little bit of line shading, maybe a 1 leaf, and that's it. Lily of the Valley is a lot of fun to draw. We'll just do these little bell-shaped blossoms and kind of on a little curving stem, and then again a long thin leaf, 1 or 2 leaves, and maybe a little line shading on those leaves. Rose is the flower for June, and I start with a spiral and then I go around and do 3 petals, then 4 petals, and then another border of petals and 1 leaf. So let's do that again. We've got the 3 petals around the spiral, and then another row of petals, and then another row or circle of petals, and 1 or 2 little pointed leaves. July is delphinium, so I start with a curving stem and these tiny little oval blossoms at the top, and then just a cluster of little flowers at the bottom of the stem. Just very basic, like scribbly flowers with their little bumpy petals and a little dot for the stamen. But as a cluster, they look so cute, and it really looks like the delphinium. Glads are one of my favorites, so I was happy to learn they are the August birth flower because that's my birthday, and I always draw the stem first in pencil and then just draw these blossoms getting larger as you go down that stem, darken up where the green would be, and you're all done. Asters are September, and to help you draw them, I think it's best to do a guide where you draw the stamen and then do a circle around it to show you where those petals will end. October is the marigold, and this flower also benefits from a pencil guide. Do a circle and then make the lines where each row of petals will sit, and then you just fill in every row with these ruffly little petals and then some tiny little leaves there. November is mums or chrysanthemums. I didn't really know how to draw this. I did these kind of shaggy round flowers. And then December is the poinsettia. Start with your stamen, a grouping of dots in the center, and then these pointed oval-shaped petals that are all sort of singularly placed or spaced, and some delicate leaves. Oh, and don't forget the eye in poinsettia. So now I'm all set up with my Year in Flowers grid or key, and I can check that every month when I go to do the monthly cover page. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to do my journal key. And I want to do a nice sort of illustration, and it begins with a circle. You can trace a jar or whatever. And then I'm going to do this floral design, and it's made up of these two flowers sitting closely together. So I'm kind of blocking those out. I always start with a circle guide, so I know exactly how large I'm going to make the flowers. Just find that really helpful with my sketching. And then I'm really just going to do a lot of leaves bordering these two flowers. So I'm placing those, sketching those out. And then after I do the larger leaves, I'll add some tiny little leaves to make the design a little more delicate and detailed. And then I'm going to go over everything in pen. And the idea with this design is that the circle that I initially traced with the jar, that will be completely blacked out, and then there will be this nice lighter floral design. So it's a bit of a positive negative effect. So the first thing we're doing is just going over everything in pen, adding lots of line shading to make the design or the illustration look really detailed. And then I'm using my Pigma Micron to add the black right along the border of the illustration. And then I'll go in with a larger brush pen or marker to fill in the rest of that circle and make this a nice blacked out area. Eventually, I'll erase all my pencil lines and maybe add just a touch more line shading as well, and add a bit of black to the smaller leaves. And I think that illustration really pops. Finally, at the bottom, I've got space here where I can put my real key. I can list all my different symbols that I will use in the bullet journal. And we'll talk about these symbols in a minute because this is really what bullet journaling is all about. So for our symbols, we are using this blank square for task. Once your task is started, you can put a line through it, and then when it's complete, you can fill it in with lines. If you cancel it, you can exit out. List items, I use a little circle, birthdays, a heart, and an event, just a little X. And that's really all the symbols that I use in my bullet journal to stay organized. When things get busy in 2020, using those symbols in combination with a bit of shorthand or just regular writing will help you stay organized in your journal. So that's our key. And remember, you can print mine on Patreon. All the channel bonus content is available over there. So this is my year at a glance. This is what I would call Bujo housekeeping. This is a page that isn't all that fun to create, but it's nice to have. I like a journal to be self-contained, and so when I'm setting up my calendar for each month going ahead, instead of checking my phone, I can flip over to my year at a glance page and I can say, okay, it's February. What day of the month does February start on? Oh, it starts on a Saturday or whatever. So it's nice to have it here and to be able to see all of your calendars. So what I'm doing is, you can see I've blocked out my grid in pencil. I'm doing all the calendars, use a really small Pigma Micron nib for this, the 005 or the 01. That's when you want that precision. And then I've added that warm gray to highlight the days of the week, just gives that page a little something extra. And then because the calendars took up the entire page, I'm just going to write year at a glance down here in the corner. And I don't know, that's just kind of a nice touch. You don't have to do this, but it just adds a little something and makes this page at least a little bit more decorative. So I'm using my gray marker again for the lettering. I promise I'm going to use more color. I'm just easing my way in. And I'm using the Pigma Micron to do a little shadow on that lettering and then to do a little outline on my leaves as well. The year at a glance page is a really helpful one to have in your journal. Just take your time when you're creating it and use one of those smaller nib pens. If you're new to journaling or you sometimes find it hard to come up with flowers and leaves to draw to add that little something extra, we're going to do some floral doodles to help you out so that you've always got an idea when you need one. The first one starts with a simple stem and then just pairs of oval-shaped leaves. You can add a little line or extra details. That one can be varied in so many ways. And actually, this one is kind of like that one. We start with the line down the center, and then we're adding extra stems, and it's the same idea, pairs of oval-shaped leaves, but just keeping them small and adding lots. And then for this one, you can vary your botanical doodles by just doing really large leaves. These ones are sort of a pointed oval, the line down the center, and then a bunch of line shading to add that extra detail. Let's draw a flower together. I start with dots for the stamen, 4 petals, keep them a little wonky, a curving stem, and some tiny little oval-shaped leaves. Color them in dark and add a bit of line shading. My roses are just simple spirals, and I tend to do them in a pair. I'll go over it in pen here. 2 spirals just sort of butted up against each other and some pairs of leaves. Now the last flower I like to call my cup flower. You do a little semicircle or cup shape for the guide. Maybe do a couple of them all joined by a few branches. Add these tiny dark leaves and again a bit of line shading, and they're so cute. This one I use all the time. It's just these pointed leaves and berries, and you can add as many branches, as many leaves, as many berries. It's a great space filler. And speaking of berries, sometimes you just want to add some little actual berries to your floral designs. And these ones I draw in clusters with tiny little pairs of leaves. Next, I've got a flower that we're going to use a lot. I start with a circle for the guide, and then I place the center of the flower very low in that circle. Then when you put in the petals, the ones at the back are automatically larger, and the one at the front is much shorter. It gives the flower a little more dimension, a little more depth and perspective. We'll add some other petals in behind the first 4, and without too much effort, you get a flower that's quite detailed and pretty and has a little life to it. So that's one you'll be seeing in the rest of this setup. And in fact, we used that on the cover page already. Now we just did a daisy in our Flowers of the Year key, so I'll do another one here. It's just a good reminder of a floral doodle that you can always use. And finally, I'm going to finish up with another variation on those simple oval-shaped leaves. I'm dividing them with a line down the center, but then for this one, I'm going to color in one side, just gives a nice graphic look and really makes that design pop. And then the last one I'm going to do is another berry design. You're going to do all these tiny little circles and just join them with little branches. And you can see that one, you can make it as large or as small as you want to. So those are some floral doodle ideas. Next time you need some flowers or leaves for a spread or a layout, look at your floral doodles page. Okay, I think it's about time we talk giveaway, and this is an amazing haul for someone to win. We are giving away a Confidant hardcover notebook from Bear & Fig, as well as tape and stickers from Washi Wednesday. Then we've got white jelly roll pens and Pigma Micron fine liners thanks to Sakura. This is everything you need to get started with bullet journaling from our favorite brands. Oh, and did I mention we're also giving away the leather cover for that hardcover notebook? This is such a good prize pack. To win, all you have to do is subscribe to this channel and make sure to leave a comment below letting me know if you're bullet journaling this year and what your theme is. For full giveaway guidelines, see the video description below. Jumping back in, we are going to set up our date book, or what I am calling my date book. This is just a little space where you can kind of see your year at a glance in terms of things like appointments or important things, flights, that sort of thing. So what I've done is divided my page into 3. For me in this Confidant notebook, it is 7 squares per month. And then I am writing the days, the numbers 1 to 31 or 29 as it may be, along along the vertical. And then the last thing I'm doing here is I'm going along and I'm marking which days are weekends. So I'm marking all my Saturday and Sundays. And then what I'll do is I'll just put a little stripe of color there. And this really helps me to, it kind of breaks up the month and allows you to see what your weeks look like. You could also add little, MTW for the days of the week, but this is how I'm going to do it. It's quite simple. And then of course you have your year at a glance here so you can see the calendar. With the year at a glance and the date book, this is kind of all the calendar I need out of my bullet journal. I'm just going to do a little burgundy stripe at the top and write date book 2020 using that Uniball white gel pen again. And that came together kind of like the year at a glance. It's just pretty simple, but you just have to be careful with it and take your time. The next spread we're going to create is probably one of my favorites, and this is a yearly goals tracker. I'm giving myself a height and a baseline for my lettering, and then I'm writing goals in a really simple print. Then I'm placing kind of a semicircle around goals. And then I'm going to put some of my goal categories, purchases, and I have need and want, finances, lifestyle, and marriage or my relationship, so that I can list all the different goals that I have in my life. Then what I'm going to do is, if you've seen me do a dial calendar in any of the latest Plan With Me's, this is similar. I'm doing the same kind of style, and I'm going to draw a whole bunch of flowers in this semicircle surrounding the word goals in the middle. I'm using my warm gray marker to do that. I promise there's more color. There really is. I'm working into it. And I'm drawing these gray flowers, and I kind of just scribble out the shapes of petals. Often I'm doing a 3 large petals in the back and then a shorter or more shallow petal in the front, and that is going to result in flowers that look a little more three-dimensional, that have a little more perspective, a little more depth. And then after I'm done my scribbles, I am going to take my Pigma Micron. I'm using the 03 nib here, and I am drawing the flowers and still keeping everything very loose. I'm doing those 3 large petals in the back and then 2 shallow ones in the front, or maybe just 1 shallow one in the front. And the stamen in the center of the flower is really just a little bit of dotting or scribbling, and then I'm adding some line shading to those petals as well. And that's really what makes them pop. If you need to add more marker, go for it. Sometimes the flowers will kind of change shape as you're drawing them in with the pen. And I'm just gonna keep moving on here. My flowers are getting smaller as they go up towards the top of the page, and I'll be adding a little bit of a stem to kind of join everything together. And then I'm going to sketch in just some really simple pointed oval shaped leaves to border the flowers. The leaves will just be a simple line drawing. So whereas the flowers are this nice warm gray, the leaves are just going to be this very sort of white and black, and I think that will look nice, and it's also really simple and achievable. By the time I was done my leaves, I realized I need to move the title up a little bit. The leaves were kind of like eating the title, but that's fine. That's why I do everything in pencil first. So I erase that. I'm adding a little bit more line detailing to the leaves. And then I will go over all of my goal categories and just adding the little circles. Circle is the icon for a list item, so that's why I'm using the circles there. Remember the key, and that's what that looks like. Now all I need to do is add the title back in. So I will block that out in pencil again and then go over it in marker. If you're doing hand lettering in your bullet journal, it's always a good idea to do a height line and baseline. You can see I've got my lines in pencil there. And then for this one, I decided I wanted to thicken it, and I was doing it with the Pigma Micron, the 05 nib, and then I just decided to use a chisel tip marker because I really did want that thickness, and I think that turned out quite nice. It's not perfect, those letters are not perfect, so don't aim for perfection. Next, I am designing my future log layout. So this is important for me to have after my goals because it will help me actually achieve my goals. So what I've done here is divided each page into 3 horizontally, and I'm putting the month titles with the little calendar below each one. I'm putting a line out to help divide the page, but I'm also leaving the whole center empty. So make sure you don't take your line right into the center. We're going to flip over and we're going to do that for the next 6 months. So we've got the whole year spread across 4 pages really. I'm going to fill in all these calendars. You can see my head has to get really close to the page in order to do those little numbers. And that is sort of the bones or the skeleton of my future log. So what I'll do is I'll actually be able to block out my goals. I've got another page there because I'm going to do my YouTube goals. Maybe I'll put that on Instagram if you want to see what it looks like when it's done. But I want to do a color illustration in the center of that future log. And so what I find helpful when I'm approaching color, when I'm trying to do color, is to figure out my color palette ahead of time because I don't want things getting really bold. You know me, I want everything subtle. Subtle, like warm gray is subtle. And so I have a little notebook here and I'm just kind of playing around and deciding ahead of time before I work in my journal what the colors will be. And I really like this color palette. It's sort of like an altered primaries where you've got the peach, red, and navy blue. And those are the colors that I will be using for the illustration that is going to sit in the center of my future log. And because this is 4 pages or 2 different pages, I'm going to do sort of a similar illustration on both of them. So it's kind of like our cover page. I'm doing those navy leaves and the navy leaves are larger. Then I come in with the lighter blue and do some smaller leaves. So we're thinking about different colors, but also different sizes. And in that way, we don't have to do a lot of different stuff. We just have to make small changes. And here I am using a nice dark burgundy for the flower in the center. And then I'll just add a hint of that brighter pink for pretty much just the center of one flower, and then maybe a few other floral elements. Once I'm done the illustration in color, I'll come back in with my Pigma Micron. I'm using the 03, the 02 or the 03 nib, I believe. I'm just adding a bit of a sketchy line, and then I'm flipping over to the other page and I'm going to do a similar illustration, but just a little bit different. So still using the navy blue for the leaves. I'm also going to use the dark gray and the burgundy and the peach. It's a little bit of a simpler illustration. It doesn't have as many of the tiny details, but what I'm going to do to add a little something extra to this one is take my white gel pen and do some line detailing on those navy blue leaves. And I think that really makes the illustration pop. We'll add a little bit of that sketchy black line with the Pigma Micron to this illustration as well. And then I decided to add the warm gray because you always need a little bit of warm gray. Am I right? I think I'm right. So there is my future log. I've got 2 illustrations. They're sort of 2 of a kind. They go together, they flow. They're both done in the same color palette. And the final thing I'm going to do is add future log. I'm just going to write that at the bottom of both pages. And then I will take that peachy tone and highlight the days of the week. And here's how I will use my goals tracker and future log. So say I have a financial goal of saving $1,200. I need to save $1,200 this year, and I put that in my financial goal. And then I come over to my future log and I'll write in January, save $100. And then in February, save $100. So in that way, I'm making little goals that work towards my larger goals. And so that's what I'm going to be using this year to get things done. Next up, I want to create a little affirmations page. It's just so important to, I think, just say things or write things down. It's amazing what can happen when you just make a list. So I'm going to block out a rectangle in the middle of the page, and then I'm drawing some circles in the corner where I want my flowers to sit. So I always draw a guide to help me with my larger illustration. I've just done a few simple leaves around those circles, and then I'm going to turn each circle into a flower. So start with a guide for your illustration. That is so helpful. And we're just going to really border this corner in flowers, and I'm doing some very simple floral illustrations. Remember your floral doodles and your flowers of the month, and I am using this very pretty blue-gray pen to go over my illustration. So instead of the black Pigma Micron, we're switching it up and using a pretty shade of blue. I'm also going to trace over that rectangle, and I'm not using a ruler. I just like to pull the pen towards my body, keep those lines straight, but not too straight. And if your line gets really weird, just do a double line. Doing a double line is a great way to save a bad border. And I'll add a lot of line shading to those flowers and leaves to really make them pop, make them come to life. And once again, I am using my white gel pen, and I am going to write affirmations up at the top there, and then I'll create a little list a little later on. Now for the opposite page, I thought it would be fun to just do a little simple collage, and I have some white paper. I'm crinkling it up just to give me some texture. I'm going to add a little bit of washi tape, and then I'm using a brown pen to do, yet again, a little botanical illustration, just leaves with lots of line shading to make them, just a little more interesting. And so I'll eventually put a little quote or something over there. Are you still with me? This is a long video, is it not? It takes a lot to get a bullet journal set up. I did this shoot over about 3 days. Chris and I spent filming, and of course a lot of planning went into it beforehand. But don't feel that you have to set up your whole journal in one go. This could be the whole month of January. Every Sunday afternoon, you're just setting up one more page, one more layout. So this can take a while. This is supposed to be a chill, meditative hobby. At least that's how I approach it. And what I'm going to do here is a little reading tracker. So I've done, you guessed it, a botanical doodle. And then on the opposite page, I've drawn a heart, sketched a heart out in pencil first, and then I filled it in with books, and I worked it all out in pencil. And then I'm going to go over each book using my Pigma Micron. I'm using the O2 nib for this. I'm not a huge reader, so I think I have about 18 books here. If I read 18 books this year, I will be like super impressed with myself. I'm also probably going to count audiobooks. So this layout might not work for you if you are a big reader. Of course, you could make the heart bigger or make the book smaller, but I'll be quite pleased if I read a book a month. So this is my tiny little reading tracker for the year 2020. Get rid of all those pencil marks, and I think this tracker is looking quite cute. Let's go ahead and flip to the next page. And the final thing that I'm going to include in this video today in our setup is a collage page, because I am trying to incorporate a little more color, and ripped paper is definitely part of how I'm going to do that. So I've got a bunch of random pieces here, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out what would look nice. I like to play around with them, and I do like to crinkle them up because it adds that extra texture, and texture just adds that extra interest. And this page is something a little different. I thought, I'm always doing pages to do with gratitude, affirmations, resolutions, but I thought it might be kind of nice this year to do a page about those things that we want to leave behind. So many of us are always growing and changing, especially in our 20s and 30s. I'm sure at all times, actually. And I thought, there might just be some piece in having a layout that's all about what you don't want to bring into 2020. And so I'm playing around with collage, bit of washi tape, little botanical doodle, that's my style. I'm going to put a quote on that page. But then on the opposite page here, I'm going to place an envelope. And so what I've done is I've just traced it where I want it to sit. And then I'm going to block out some leaves, some thin, delicate leaves, one at the top facing towards the top of the page, one at the bottom of the page facing towards the bottom. And I'm using that same sort of blue-gray marker. I really like that color. And I'm just going to go over my little leafy sketch, fill that in, give it a little contrast, and erase all my pencil lines. And now when I place that envelope, I think that looks nice. I taped it in just using double-sided tape, and then I glued down a little piece of ripped, crinkled paper. And then I'm going to write something like "let it go" or something on there. And then I've got a little quote that I'm adding to this side of the journal spread. And yeah, this page is just all about those things that we're not going to take into 2020. So something a little different. And I just think it's fun to put an envelope in a journal. Well, that is it. My journal for 2020 is all set up. I've got my fancy leather cover on there. I have a simple wreath nameplate page, and then I have a colorful 2020 cover page with my resolutions underneath. Quite a simple page there, but I dig it. I ended up doing a little bit of ripped paper collage there just to cover up that year in flowers page that was really kind of bleeding through a little. And I've got my year in flowers key as well as my regular key. And then I have my year at a glance page with just all my calendars in case I need to see those, which I always do. We've got some floral doodle ideas. Anytime you need a flower or a leaf, look at that. We've got our date book for 2020, so appointments, flights, that kind of thing. If you need more space here, just do 2 months on a page and use an extra 2 pages, or would it be extra 4 pages. I'll be putting my YouTube goals tracker in there. To see that, look me up on Instagram at Shada Campbell. We have our goals page, our year of goals, all divided into purchases, finances, all those categories. And then to help us actually achieve those goals, we have our future log. So we put the goal here, the big goal, the yearly goal. And then in the future log, we break it down into achievable monthly goals, and we list all those here. So you don't list your dates here. You've got your date book for that. This future log, at least for me, is all about the goals and breaking those goals down into simple steps. And then we have a page of affirmations, which I think writing those down is also so important in helping us achieve our goals. I've got my little reading tracker, read more books, Shada. Please read more books. And then I have my page, just a bit of collage, the things that we won't be taking into 2020. And that is it. Holy crap, this was a long YouTube video. Well, I hope that your setup was successful. I had so much fun doing this, and I hope that you'll follow along with the tutorial and you'll find it helpful in creating your own journal this year. Don't forget, you can print my stuff over on Patreon if you'd like to access that. It's all available for a couple bucks a month. And if you want more ideas, my 2019 flip through will be on YouTube next Tuesday, so don't forget to subscribe.